Hi, Gabriele. Welcome to the session here, talking about how to modernize the OSS from cloud native and
Yeah.
AI first. I would like you to introduce yourself and what you do at Blue Planet, and also what Blue Planet does for our audience, and then we take it from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Hitesh. First of all, thank you for having me here. Great
Yeah.
to be here. So my name is Gabriele Di Piazza. I am the Vice President for Products, Alliances, and Architectures at Blue Planet. I manage the overall portfolio. Blue Planet is a division of Ciena,
Yeah.
large company, leader in optical transport, IP optical as well. We really focus on the topic of intelligent automation across the board with leading offers from inventory, orchestration, and assurance.
Yeah.
Obviously focusing on multi-domain, multi-vendor, agnostic to the network function underneath, and really solving several use cases from fixed line, mobile,
Yeah.
uh, consumer enterprise across the board.
Right. So you're literally sitting at the heart of the network where all the operations are happening. As we see, most of the operators are now moving, from the traditional approach, doing some digital transformation, adapting cloud. How do you see from the overall stack that you have from the OSS
Yeah.
perspective, the migration to the cloud? Obviously, the challenges. How do you see the resolution of some of those, and what are the benefits of, moving to the cloud native stack?
Yeah. Interesting dynamic. First of all, OSS is an environment, it's an ever evolving environment. I mean, unsolved, I would say that in the general digital transformation, modernization is one of those areas which is still undergoing this transformation. What people will be very surprised is that about 75 of our implementations today are already in public cloud,
Yeah.
and which is actually a great achievement. And I think the core aspects of modernizing OSS, and they really go through the cloud native transformation that we had operated in the software. But as I always say, there's a technology aspect and a people aspect in cloud native. Of course, we can talk about containers and DevOps and CI/CD and
Yeah.
so forth, but there's an aspect of the skills required, the training and the supportability aspects, and also a new ecosystem which is forming, with not just the cloud native aspects, but which brings also this hybridity, right, with the legacy infrastructure, legacy implementation with the new implementation in cloud, but also the AI infusion, which also requires yet another transformation the carrier side in terms of management and governance as well. We have hundreds of customers on our platform. We've been living through this and see this dynamic evolving in front of our eyes. So I think it's very important to understand that this is not just a technology aspect, there's a people aspect as well.
Yeah. In this journey, right, from on-prem to cloud native, and I would say define the approach that you've taken is more like a platform approach, rather than having this, discrete solution approach. Uh, can you elaborate a little bit on the collaboration that AWS and Blue Planet has done, and how it has helped the CSPs, gain the value out of the whole cloud native migration?
Yeah. Well, first of all, working closely in understanding how a platform needs to be architected was some of the first benefit,
Yeah.
I would say. Because as we learned with our own expertise, but we needed to, learn from the real experts on cloud. Um, and this also meant understanding not just, again, the technology aspect, how the migration path will be built. It's interesting. I actually start to see there are obviously many, brownfield carriers, few greenfield carriers. I start to see many carriers now starting to think of, okay, do I want to, for example, stop the brownfield and start from a greenfield perspective? So how to bridge from one to the other? That's the help that AWS really gives us in understanding even your journey as you build your services as well, because you've been in this market earlier
Yeah.
and so forth. And then, of course, we also decided to spend almost a couple of years in creating a common platform for all of our different products. We have three main areas in inventory, orchestration across multi-domain, service orchestration, multi-cloud orchestration, and assurance or path computation and analytics. And we find that instead of having to platform each product all the time, we decided to really build a common cloud native environment with some common services, Kubernetes based and so forth, that allow us to progress and basically speed up our deployment.
So very interesting point that you touch on people and process. I would also want to bring another aspect. With this whole transition, do you also engage with the CSPs where they are moving from CAPEX to OPEX? It's a kind of, mindset shift, but also completely, how they do the business, right? From moving away from rigid contracts to pay as you go. How's your experience with that? And if you can share some thoughts.
Yeah, I think that sometimes I find a gap between the demand and the operating model, where obviously carriers have been very capex centric in terms of the way they typically plan their budget and spend. But I think it's clear that we need to evolve to a model which is way more flexible in terms of usage base and also being able to decompose OSS in different services or different components that can potentially be even combined on the fly
Yeah.
based on the type of application required. Blue Planet historically has been offering application in the space of, as I mentioned before, or inventory system, orchestration system, assurance systems. Now we start to see customers asking us for example, network slicing end to end, where you start from a planning process, deployment, optimization, all the way to monetization. So what's interesting, they're looking for a service end to end, as opposed to just a building block, because that's the way they need to operate.
Yeah. No, I think very interesting point here, and I think Dish as a common customer is also adapting the same principles that you just touched. Moving a little bit ahead from cloud native to AI, there is no solution that is not touching AI or using AI. How are you adopting AI and also Gen AI, if I extend the conversation, in your offerings today, and also how we are collaborating with Network Genius, probably a little bit on that, yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, we've been operating in a very data-rich environment for what we do. We collect process data, make reasoning of data, both in our assurance suite, in our traffic analysis, path computation suite, and more in inventory as well, and everything combined in closed loop. We had an AI and applied AI research team for quite some time, where we are basically building the capabilities out of the box in Blue Planet application. But what we have done is, instead of hard coding those inside our application, we built something called AI Studio, which is basically basically an AI hosting and instantiation environment where we're able, with our own research team, build those use cases, whether they then plugged in into our assurance product or orchestration or inventory, but also open up to our customers who own their data to operate their pipeline or bring in their own data scientists and PhDs. And eventually, this application, our vision is that could even be exchanged between carriers. So that's really the path from analytics to machine learning, reinforcement learning, AI today. I think AI, Gen AI, to be honest, is the future, as I think it will impact across the board, up and down our portfolio, from the user interaction, how you will be able to interact, and this is where the fit with Network Genius, I think, is phenomenal, because the idea of, instead of logging into an app and looking for a problem or an alarm or a specific components, but starting having either the problem be presented to you or ability to query the system in natural language, and over time keep refining that information on the front end. And this could really become from the presentation to a helper, but back down in the back end, we look at how do we solve harder customer problems, more complex customer
Yeah.
problems. How do we solve the problem of code generation? We have a set of maybe 3,000 plus resource adapters for any type of network
Yeah.
in the world.
Yeah.
How can we learn from that and basically use Gen AI as a way to, generate and speed up the deployment? So I really do see Gen AI becoming
Yeah.
almost intrinsic to
Yeah.
our products in the
Yeah, I
future.
think this is very much aligned with our thought process of design, deliver, and then remediate and take action on this. And the whole idea of network genius, as we discussed in the past, is more around how do we create a network or service design, from design to implementation, which is orchestration for network or a service. From orchestration, moving to the assurance piece, which is where your capabilities are also very well defined. From orchestration, then identifying, remediating some of the some of the challenges in the network, and then also taking the actions with automation. Because if we don't take action and automate it, I mean, the whole value is lying there. So that's a great fit, and I think the collaboration that we have on this should bring some more use cases for our common customers.
That's the evolution of generative AI, right? So not just about consuming data, but generating from either recommending what to do, all the way to how do I configure
Yeah.
my network, and then building that confidence over time, right? It's one of the key things.
So moving a little bit back from the AI topic, I think AI is as good as the data is. And there is a ton of data, as we know, CSP's own, both from the network perspective, from the customer perspective, from services perspective. How do you see this in the new world of cloud native, AI first kind of approach? How do you manage all this data in this platform kind of approach?
Yeah. Again, here too, let me split the answer in two ways. I think there's a architecture or technical view where, uh, especially in telco, data is massively distributed.
Yeah.
And data can be pulled in on data lakes and so forth, but you always start from data insertion at the edge and then eventually stage it in. And so there's clearly the aspect of how do you manage data across the architecture, and that's a key thing. This is where one of the aspects is how can we bring this abstraction layer in between to basically make this data consumable from a network perspective. Second aspect of data is also the privacy and sovereignty aspects. Telcos operate in a regulated environment, and so it's very important to understand how to actually build a solution that it fits their own requirements. That's why I think ideally we should think of this as an abstraction layer. And only in that case, you can now start looking at data lineage and data governance, and then have the right clean data, if you will, to build operations on
Absolutely.
top.
Looking forward, you and we are engaged with a lot of customers globally. We are seeing this, adoption of cloud native or AI first OSS. But rather than looking at the whole platform and OSS approach, if we break this down into, say, key use cases, what would be one or two or three use cases that you think would become a success story from now, and we will be talking sitting here in 2025?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't think we should be talking about cloud native as a new thing anymore. I have to be honest with you, the adoption we see already is on cloud, and I think it's table stakes.
Yeah.
We do see aspects of monetization in telecom. This across enterprise, wireless and wireline, wholesale. And I think that working across, there's been a lot of narrative around 5G, yes, but there's an equal large market in fixed line as well. And what's happened with fixed wireless access is another aspect as well. I would argue that's one of the use cases which is driving more of the 5G SA core there. But in general, I do think we'll see a transformation of the application, and the discussion that we had, not because I'm here with you, but Network Genius and the Gen AI capability, I don't think it's a bubble. I actually think it's something that will be implemented.
Yeah.
It will be a natural evolution of how applications are architected, right? You don't question today if you have a search box in an app,
Yeah.
And this is the same way it's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, I mean, basically how we interact with the whole network would change or evolve by 2025.
Yes.
Gabriele, on that note, thank you very much for all your views. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.